This is huge for the Toronto Maple Leafs as they have found a secret weapon, and he is Nikita Grebyankin. If you haven't heard about him yet, get ready to start hearing about him because he's going to play a big role in the Toronto Maple Leafs' future. I want to break down some wild comments he had about his expectations going forward, as well as his future with the Toronto Maple Leafs and what he expects from fans regarding him. So stay tuned for all that in this episode. But before we do, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, about 71% of you guys, make sure to hit that button. We produce daily Leafs content, and you're going to want to hit the subscribe button because the Leafs season is getting closer and closer, and there's tons of news going on there. So thank you guys for your support. But Darius, we have a lot to go over today, and obviously, Nikita Grebyankin is a guy we discussed a couple weeks back. He is going to be a very interesting player going forward for the Toronto Maple Leafs. He could factor himself onto the team this year, more likely maybe the year after, but he had some very interesting things to say that we're going to cover today, and this is a player we're both super excited about and someone we're definitely going to be keeping an eye on throughout the entire year here. So you can see this. It was basically an article dropped saying Nikita Grebyankin is eager to begin his North American career in the Leafs organization. And again, I'll give it to you, Darius, just for a second here. Nikita Grebyankin, again, if you can check out our video from a couple weeks ago if you don't know too much about him, but he is a guy that is kind of soaring up through the Toronto Maple Leafs pipeline per se, and he's getting getting a lot of hype. And you can see this here amid his preparation for the 2024 and 2025 season. He spoke on how the previous year went and how he was getting ready for life in Canada. Obviously a big change for him. And as mentioned earlier, Grebyankin's production in the playoffs was a steep drop-off from where he was in the regular season. However, the reason for that is due to him suffering an injury. So he does have some injury concerns, but if you saw him during the regular season, he can play, and he's going to be huge for the Toronto Maple Leafs going forward.
Yeah, he's going to be a huge wild card for the Leafs, whether he makes the lineup or not, because, going forward, he will eventually make the lineup. And I'm really high on this guy. I think he's going to be a really good player. And I've kind of been penciling him into lineups because I'm not sure if he's even going to make the team, because a lot of the wording around him too, like in that article, is he's ready to make the jump to the Leafs organization, not necessarily the Leafs lineup themselves, right? The big club. So he could end up on the Marlies. What we know for sure is he's leaving the KHL. He had a great season last year, put up great numbers, and won the championship, right? He won the Gagarin Cup. So this is a guy who knows how to win. He's relatively young still, right? He wants to make an impact at the NHL level. It's going to be a learning curve for him. I'm excited to see what he does in preseason because the game will be different, right? So if he's able to adapt very quickly, I think he's going to be successful, and he's probably going to play a big role for the Leafs this season, as soon as this season, right? It could be going forward, but I think if he figures it out pretty quickly, it will be this season. Although he could end up on the Marlies still, that is still a possibility, but I like his outlook. I love the mindset. We'll get into that as well, some of his comments. And I think, if I'm going to make a bet or a Darius guarantee or whatever we want to call it at this point, I feel like he may make the team this year. I feel like they could use a player like this. And, like we talked about yesterday, they need more players who are defined in their roles. And I'm not going to pencil him up into the second line so far, but we don't know what's going to happen with Nick Robertson. So I wonder, if Nick Robertson leaves via trade or whatever it is, he's not going to play because he's not signed right now. I wonder if this is a guy who can take a spot like that and make the most of it. I'm excited to see what he does.
Yeah, the Nick Robertson trade is the biggest question mark here, whether they re-sign Nick Robertson or whether they trade him. If they do get rid of him, then maybe that opens up a spot for other players, specifically Nikita Grebyankin here. And you can see this. There's just a lot of stuff. And he had some very interesting things to say about kind of just his current situation. So you can pause and read the whole thing. But it basically says his acclimation process. Again, this is a huge change from the KHL moving all the way to Canada. But the biggest acclimation process for living in Canada has been meeting up with his teammates and learning to speak English better. He's already met with Matthews, Marner, Tavares, all these guys, even new head coach Craig Berube. And he has been pleased with how friendly people in Toronto have been despite his quote-unquote bad English, as well as with the advice and help he's gotten from players, including former Leafs goalie Ilya Samsonov, of course, who they've been in contact because Grebyankin is a Russian prospect as well, or at least Russian. But this is it's very heartwarming almost to see him reach out to all these players. He seems to really like it in the start of his Toronto Maple Leafs journey. And you mentioned a wild card. I think he is going to be a wild card because there's a chance that he starts the season with the Marlies. There's a chance he starts the season with the Leafs and has a really good year. Like, there is a world where this player is good enough to start for the Maple Leafs and actually make an impact going forward, especially given the fact that the forward group right now with the Maple Leafs is very interesting with Nick Robertson, with Tyler Bertuzzi gone. There's still some holes there that need to be filled, and hopefully Brad Treliving, whether they do it in the form of Nikita Grebyankin, trading Nick Robertson, maybe sign, like we discussed yesterday, a Cal Clutterbuck. But I don't know. What are your thoughts on this? It's very interesting. You look at his stats last year, 41 points in 67 games. He's obviously a right winger. He's only 21 years old, so it might do him some good to go down with the Marlies and kind of chill out for maybe the year and then come up at his age 22 to 23 season next year, the year following the next one. But he's ready to he's almost NHL ready, and that's very rare for someone who was drafted just a couple years ago in the 5th round who really had a breakout season last year, especially if you look at it from the year before.
Yeah, I don't want to get too excited and say, yeah, he's definitely going to make the team. But when I think about him going to the Marlies, he's not 18, he's 21, right? Or even 19. He's 21. He's played against men in the KHL. So he's used to that already. Although I do still think that the NHL is probably more physical and a tighter game. So he's going to have to get used to that. That is the thing that is going to determine whether he's on the Marlies or the Maple Leafs this year. And, obviously there's other factors as well, like what happens with Nick Robertson, like we mentioned, and other, aspects of the lineup if the Leafs make a trade as soon as this week, which is the rumor going around right now. But, that's really going to determine where he ends up to start the season, is how fast he can get acclimated to the NHL game. And obviously preseason is a different animal too, because it's not the full experience. But I do think that he can make this team. I do honestly believe that. I'm not saying he's going to play top line minutes or even top 6, but I think he can make this team and be an effective player for the Leafs. And if you pair him with a couple really good players and he takes a spot away from maybe McMahon or something, right? I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I think it's possible because he has that skill set and he had a really, really good year as a relatively young player in a men's league, right, in the KHL. So I'm excited to see what he does. He has the championship pedigree as well. It's hard to win championships in any league. He's done it already at a young age. So excited to see what he does with the Leafs. But again, I wouldn't rule the Marlies out even to start the year. He could end up on the Leafs by the end of the year. I'm really interested to see what happens in training camp, how they're using this player, because like we mentioned, right, the Leafs need more defined roles. And if he doesn't exactly fit in to start the year, I could see him with the Marlies. There's no harm in that. Get used to the North American game. So it's going to be fun. This is a fun player, and the Leafs need more fun, honestly.
Yeah, and the training camp is going to be very interesting this year, specifically with Easton Cowan fighting for a spot. Now Nikita Gabyankin's fighting for a spot, as well as some of the other guys. You're looking at Fraser Minton. A lot of guys are starting to push for an NHL spot here, and you can see this with the start of training camp fast approaching. Gabyankin isn't thinking too far ahead in terms of where he will end up to begin the upcoming season. He feels good about his health and is eager to learn the differences in play style between the KHL and NHL. It is too early to say definitively if he will start the season on the Leafs roster, but he is confident in himself to give it his all. Very similar quotes to, obviously not the same situation, but at least at the end there, very confident in himself, as Easton Cowan said as well, how he is pushing for a spot, but that he's not going to really take anything for granted. But he also had a quote. It said, "It's wrong for an athlete to describe himself. People should do it." He said, "Fans should see my game for themselves and describe me. I will go out and prove it on the ice and prove it, or in the arena, that I'm ready and that I can play at this level. I know it's difficult, but it's all in my hands." A very inspirational quote out of Nikita Grebyankin here. And like I mentioned in the intro, so he just wants us fans to develop our own opinion on him, and we're definitely going to do that, especially us. We're going to be probably, microanalyzing a lot of the things he's doing in training camp, because that is the most fun thing to do in training camp for a lot of the younger players. Again, there's a lot to look forward to for the Leafs here. Easton Cowan and Nikita Grebyankin are going to be battling for a roster spot, and depending on that's why what happens with Nick Robertson is so important over the next coming weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I think whatever happens with Nick Robertson may dictate the rest of the lineup decisions. And I'm really excited to see healthy competition as well, because, the last couple of years we've seen it in training camp for sure, right? But I think the Leafs need more of that healthy competition where guys are really battling for the last couple spots or for more defined roles. Like, yeah, I want to play on the second line, right? I'm going to play really well with Nylander or Tavares or whoever it is, right? Or fighting for that first line spot, because nothing's set in stone right now. We don't know what Matthew Knies is going to do this year. We don't know if Bobby McMahon is going to continue to do what he was doing in the second half. We do not know, right? We expect that to happen, but we don't know. So, if you come into training camp, have a really good campaign and figure out the North American game, I feel like the sky's the limit for a player like this, because he can really fit in with a lot of the skilled players, and he's a bigger body and he's won a championship. So, I'm excited to see what he does in training camp. Something to look forward to in training camp, like you said, to microanalyze everything. And where does he fit in? That's the question. Does he start the year with the Leafs? We don't know. A lot of this hinges on Nick Robertson as well. Does he sign before training camp? Because if he doesn't, I don't know if he's going to play before December. I really don't.
Yeah, it's going to be very interesting. Let us know in the comments what your thoughts are on all of this. A very exciting player, and it's going to be a very exciting few weeks for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and depending what happens with a lot of their players. Let us know. See you guys tomorrow.